All right, welcome back to the Culture Coach podcast. I am so excited for my guest today. I have with us Ted Whetstone. Ted, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me, Wendy.
Great. So glad you're here. I'm excited to dive in on how we can make organizations a better place. I know we both want that. So I'm excited to dive in. Let's start by having you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, what you do, and how you got there.
A professed left brainer turned right brainer turned whole brainer. How's that? Studied engineering and physics at school because I want to understand how the universe worked. Ended up a career in technical sales, product management, business development, both domestic and international. But I had about a 10-15 year stint as a management consultant to large organizations and doing a lot of change management. And, those projects can go wrong pretty quickly. What we really learned is, and this may sound arrogant, but I would tell you that 90%, if not 100% of my engagements, right, the client would tell you they were successful because the consultants didn't come out from the outside and just tell you what to do. They engaged the organization. We did, right? And it became their idea. And it's just a metaphor for the change that we need to create. It has to come from the organization. We can't shove it down their throats. But as I did all this work, I was like, okay, we're making process improvements and we're becoming more efficient. But what about the people side? Their job is just to get things done. And I thought, what a shame. So that's why I pivoted into executive coaching just about COVID. And it was a little bit the other side where consultants get paid for our recommendations that come out of our mouth. Coaches get paid for our questions. Mm-hmm. And so it really is a different modality. And of course, I employ both. But that's sort of what's led me towards that, what I call right brain, the more heart-based connecting. And then as you and I would agree, we have to have both strategy and culture. They have to be in their right, left, whatever we frame them at. It has to be a collective whole conversation. Otherwise, it's just siloed off as someone else's job. It's everyone's job.
I agree. And I think one of the biggest mistakes is, some people put culture in HR or, in one group's area. And I think when I work with clients, I start with kind of that mission, vision, core values, what's important, what's the foundational stuff. And then how do we make sure that employees are aware of what expectations are there for them, how we want them to behave, all of that. And so I love your approach also to that systems thinking, because that's how I think of culture. I don't think it's one person's job and it exists. There is a culture in every organization, whether you're intentional about it or not. And so how did you kind of move to that systems thinking, or is that you've kind of always had that systems thinking from your...
Yeah, interesting. I use that term because it's understood and known. To be totally honest with you, I spent 15 years on this sort of, it was the physics of the universe and the psychology of mind. And if I could, just like bridging the quantum world with the gravitational model, they can't figure it out. I couldn't figure out this one either. However, what is true is that humans, this is my take, right? There was a time when the sun revolved around us.
Yeah.
We still say the sun comes up and it goes down. And so we have these mental models that the world works as we experience them.
So true.
And it's just human. So the systems thinking really is that when we can step back and look at holistically how things come together. The best culture is when we have the high level, you can again tell me how you implement, but from a strategy standpoint, we'll have an idea of what we think we want to do. And then we engage the organization to say, does this make sense? What do you think? How does this connect to what you're trying to accomplish? So then they have a stake.
Yes.
This culture we're creating versus just an execution. And so it's a two-way. Leadership needs to set the context, maybe the boundaries, maybe the guardrails, but then invite in the organization to fill it in with their brilliance.
Yes, I agree 100%. And I have a background also in change management, got certified in organizational change management and leadership. And so I understand the value of bringing others along, right? You can't just, push it down. They have to feel the buy-in. When it comes to culture, I think I do give, when I work with like founders, especially business owners that have created this organization, I'm more about creating an intentional culture where it's their business. What do they want it to be? What what are the guardrails, and then the employees within it, you can choose to be a part of that or to not be a part of it, as long as they're communicating, here's what those expectations are, here's what our culture, what we want it to be. Then as an employee, I get to choose, right? This aligns with my values or it doesn't. It causes friction for me. So I don't, I'll choose to work somewhere else. That's kind of how I think about it. But I agree that when you're rolling something out and you want to bring others along, you can't just push it down. If you want to create something and get buy-in in an already existing organization, you have to pull others in. Absolutely.
And then to your point, especially with startup world, not only what we're talking about here to the running of the company and alignment and all those types of things, but to the recruiting process. I'm sure you, right? How do you take that vision thing and how do we turn that into recruitment? I'm just curious because.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I do for some clients as well, where you take what are those behaviors that you're looking for, right? Those core values. And then typically I'll help convert it to competencies. So what are those competencies that you want to hire for? But it really starts with the attraction phase before you even have the candidate in the door. How are you talking about your organization? What is your reputation in the community? And what are the types of, potential employees that you want to be attracting? You have to be aware of that too.
It's so interesting. There's theory and practice. Leadership team at a company where they say they want to create certain culture objectives. And then okay, great. We've got a team charter and we're ready to go. Now, how are we going to roll this out to the organization? It's, oh, no, we just need to know what our plan is. And so we're good. I think that's the whole point, is to facilitate the organization towards these things. Otherwise, it's initiative of the month.
So what do you think when you look at that level of complexity that leaders have to face? What are some of the biggest mistakes that leaders make when they're navigating that complexity?
Well, so of course, the twofold things, unexpected implications of decisions. You're probably aware of this because your change management background, but the iceberg model we talk about, there's 10% of the iceberg sticks above the water, and that's what we see. Well, similarly in organizations, those are the effects we see, whether it's, metrics changing or people quitting or whatever happens. That's right. And the mistake I see is leaders trying to address each one of those things that they say, whack-a-mole.
Yes.
Whereas if we got to the next layer in the pyramid, in the iceberg, it's, okay, where else are we seeing this happening? What are the patterns and trends in the organization? Because it's probably not that one isolated event. And if we can start to see those patterns, then we can start to ask, what are the structures that are keeping these patterns in place, right? And then we get to, okay, what are the mental models that are, right? And so the mistake is to just look at the surface issues and not try to get underneath them. And guess who has the answers? Your people. And you would be able to tell this of anyone. I worked with a very contentious client situation, and it was psychological safety. We had to reestablish psychological safety and trust, and then communication could happen, right? And so we have to make it such that leaders engage the organization to problem solving, not be managers and just try to put out fires.
Yes, absolutely. What a great trait or behavior to look for is that problem solving rather than the managing, as you say. And I had the pleasure of hearing Brene Brown recently, author, speaker. She was at a local university, and came to speak. And she said that with the onset now, or the AI is here, that more and more we're going to be hiring for those problem solvers, because that's the skill set that we're going to need more of in this world where technology is going to be so much more prevalent. And so I think that problem solving skills is going to be even more important in the decades to come.
I agree. I'd love to bounce this off you, if I may, live, because I differentiate between what's, acting like a manager, not a bad thing, but as you move up the organization, the percent manager versus the percent leader is different. And I define it as this, of course, managers trying to get things done, right? I get that. But leaders, I say, don't just lead other people. Leaders create leaders,
Mm,
cause leaders. And then, so the point, to your point, as we move towards AI and everything else, it's less about what you can get done, but how you think about, solving problems.
yes.
And so the leaders really need to be coaching their people through their thought process versus the right answer or not.
Yes.
And so that we can get flattened leadership throughout and people can be responsive, et cetera. But my question to you might be similarly, I guess, do you see similar with culture where is that a leadership requirement or competency? To your point, is that ability to coach others to becoming a leader?
Absolutely. I think that those leaders are able to coach, absolutely, and as you said, ask the right questions. Are That's going to help them. I mean, I guess the biggest piece I would say is being able to convey and look for those behaviors that they've identified as what they want the culture to be, and then by coaching, you can coach some of the behaviors, right? They're not necessarily skills; they're ways of behaving that are you should be able to coach for. I guess that's a
Mhm.
long way of saying it, I think.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I just got certified in emotional intelligence sort of
Oh, cool.
assessment, the EQI. And look, we're all learning, right? We think, what we I know what emotional intelligence is. It's understanding how those emotions affect, right, your own
Yes.
self-regard or that of others, your relationships, how you problem solve.
Yes.
And to your point, like helping those people understand where their emotions are getting triggered, what those emotions are,
Yes.
right? So that they can interpret those and then be more effective
Yes.
than just using language and trying to understand maybe what you mean. So it's kind of that, yeah, that there's the right brain again, right? Listen to
Yeah.
people as humans, not as functional roles. Whatever happened as culture eats strategy for breakfast?
Yeah.
And
Well, I mean, the studies are really remarkable on if you can improve employee engagement, improve the culture. I mean, it improves productivity, it improves retention, it can increase revenue. There's a statistic from Gallup that if it, companies that have a strong culture compared to those that don't have a 4x increase in revenue. So it just blows my mind that why would we not be doubling down on that? Like, why would that not be like, let's figure out how to,
yep.
you know, create a culture where our people are engaged?
Yeah, it's sort of interesting. I don't mean this pejoratively, but like you could say culture is the feature,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And the benefit is what happens when we good culture is that we talk to each other, we collaborate. What happens when we collaborate? We come up with better ideas, right? When
Yes.
we better ideas, we innovate, right? We stay ahead of the market. We listen to our customers and sort of a hive mentality
Yeah.
than a bunch of individuals, which is our strength as humans is this thing on the front side of our head, but it's also the thing that gets in our way.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. It's a word, but the effect is workability.
Yes.
And if there's a workability, then you're just putting drag on the whole organization.
And so I think sometimes, and tell me if your experience with coaching leaders, if you've seen this, but that confidence and self-confidence, that we have some limiting beliefs often that prohibit us from moving forward. And so is there work that you do with leaders to kind of help overcome those limiting beliefs, or how do you see that being of value?
Yeah, we call them leaders, but they're humans with responsibilities. And the problem, of course, is we're all afraid to look bad. I'm sure this is all part of our wiring back then that we were afraid to get thrown out of the tribe.
Hmm.
So we do various things. In fact, I've looked up on Chat GPT recently. I said, why do we have, self-deprecating tendencies and sort of, it evolved forward because that kept you from stepping out too far from the tribe. It kept you from getting killed, doing
Yeah.
reckless things. But to maintain humility and be humble kept you safe.
Mm.
So good to understand that that's what's going on, in our own heads. So what I find with leaders they're all challenged with, my goodness, nowadays it's just harder than ever. The place we talk about coming from your values, and we talk about, I don't mean the, critical stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
but a lot of that can feel like it's outside of us.
Mm.
Our personal value starts to get closer. What I really try to encourage, and this is just for all of us, is to listen to who you are, right? What is your purpose, mission, perspective, and view? Because that is the differentiator between you and someone else doing a functional role, right? We have some different skills and competencies, but that's kind of my answer to you, is that there's no magic. Yes, there are things to be more effective,
Yeah.
and delegating and empowering, and all that's critical leadership capability. But once you get to a point leader, how do you move to a extraordinary leader who
Yeah.
just inspires, and its connection with self?
Mm. Yes.
And that gets hard unless they're willing to be vulnerable, do the work,
Hmm.
right? Because they're terribly busy, but to do that internal research and, like, what am I about, such that this is not okay for, if I'm about integrity and being your word, well, that's how we're going to operate, right? And I am, and we're never going to be perfect, but that causality, anyway, that when you know that about yourself, then you can really lead with confidence into the
Yeah.
unknown.
Yeah. It's like putting in the airplane. If we're, you got to put your mask on first.
Yeah.
Leaders need to continue to develop, become aware, and continue to develop so that they can develop others. And as you said, leaders create leaders. And so, in order to do that, we have to take care of ourselves and have that awareness. That's great.
I think back to your point, well, the AI point and being effective leaders, I look, what's going to differentiate humanity from
Yeah.
the cyborgs
Yeah.
is our humanity,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
that comes most from the heart, not from the head. Look, most organizations are economic organizations,
Yes.
right? And then that's sort of the problem. The American model of economic, of course, is quarterly mindset,
Yeah.
deliverables, and
Yeah.
and that works, right? It's done work so far, except it's burning us out tremendously. Um, so I would love to ask you, if we have a minute, like, what cases have you seen of companies, quote unquote, doing it right?
Mm.
Um, and was it the people? Was it the frameworks? What do you see as the one or two things that if we did, the rest would naturally unfold?
So there's two sides of it, and I kind of alluded to this before: an intentional culture versus a good or a bad culture. And I
Yeah.
think for me, what I have experienced I worked at a tech company that had a phenomenal culture, and I worked at another organization where I burned out, and I left thinking that it was a toxic culture. But what I learned in retrospect was that there were plenty of people there that were happy to be there. It my values were misaligned with their values. And so there was a friction in me that caused me to burn out. And
Yep.
so it was toxic for me, but it wasn't toxic for everybody. So that's why I like to think of, and the tech company where I worked, that I thought it was a phenomenal culture, there were people that didn't fit in and they left, unhappy. And
Mm,
so that's why I think as leaders or CEOs or founders, create the culture that you want and then attract the right people. But I will say, I think the culture where I felt like it was done right, the leader, the CEO, um, there was transparency. I was there from 2007 to 2018, so
mm,
for about 10 years, and I saw them go public. I saw them go private again. I saw them go public again. And where they and the culture started to fade over time. But where I saw it the strongest was when the CEO, he was living the values. We all knew what the core values were. We could recite them, but we were living them and breathing them. It was part of our hiring practice. It was part of our performance assessment. It was all through that employee life cycle, woven in and integrated. And so that's the framework that I take in to work with CEOs to say, what's your mission, vision, and values? What behaviors are you looking for? What's your leadership philosophy? Now, let's make sure that everybody in this organization knows that. And those are the types of people that we're attracting, so that it's congruent with who you are as a leader and the work that you want to get done as an organization. Does
Yeah.
that?
It does. Thank you. And it also brings hope, I think, to your previous question of like, why are we pushing this rock up a hill like Sisyphus? I think it's calling us all to what it is we say. And if it's only the top of the organization that's holding the rest of the organization accountable, then it's kind of a parental thing. It
Right.
should be at right down to the lowest level, and that's not even the right term, right? The individual contributorist most level, and that's where we call BS on. Hey, right? We keep saying these niceties, but we're not living them, and be willing to be abrasive.
Yes.
But we have to create that safe space for those voices to be heard, because otherwise you get the echo effect that we're aware of, and that's not going to build a resilient organization.
Yeah. And the things that in the organizations that I've worked with where they tell me, well, I don't feel like I can my people aren't telling me, like I don't know if they're being honest with me. And then that's where doing some coaching and, with the leadership team, with the frontline employees to really listen and hear, I think there's that piece of it too. It's, that's important, that the coaching piece and the listening piece. And if it's not happening from the leaders, then having outsiders come in and help with that as well.
Well, yes, just like facilitating a meeting, there's no agenda when a third party comes in. There's no politic or anything else. But what I agree with you on the coaching, not so much a shameless plug. I mean, I wish I had a coach when I was sent to Japan when I was 29 years old, and I was running a subsidiary in a foreign country. I was terrified, right? I had no one to coach me. And so it's not that the coach necessarily infuses information. That can happen.
Yeah.
But it's helping you find those answers from within, right? And I think we all need that within us. Someone I was talking to recently said, well, sounds like, I said, yeah, we coach the whole person, right? It's the whole person. And what you do anywhere is what you do everywhere. So how you're handling your relationships at home is probably how you're dealing with conflict, et cetera, in the workplace. And, the idea that we're to develop ourselves, to understand ourselves. So for instance, before, if you had understood, you just knew you're unhappy, but you didn't quite have, now you might have been clear then, this is not aligned, we now leave. But for some, they just didn't realize. And then talking it through with them, they realize, oh, I'm not feeling expressed here. And it turns out they're holding themselves back, or they have an engagement conversation with their boss, who then encourages it and then moves along. Back to that IQ, EQ thing. You can't change personality types. You can't change really someone's intelligence. You can very much change their emotional response and their emotional understanding. And so that's the place to get change in organizations, is to bring in, again, the appropriate developmental coaching, the situation. The person has to want it themselves, to have it thrust on them. No good.
Yeah.
And enable them to be their best. And that will create the culture. And we just all need constant reinforcement. Knowing it is not enough. Well, hopefully we'll solve all this, and everyone will be dying to go to work.
Yes.
To the company that you're working with, Wendy. So we need you.
And we need you, Ted. And if people want to work with you, where do they find you?
Easy, tedwhetstone.com. Whetstone is a sharpening stone. It's spelled WHET, because he used to wet it and then you sharpen your stone. So we say never dull moment, but just tedwhetstone.com, and you'll see it from there.
Awesome. Well, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I'm so grateful for you taking the time out, and for the audience getting to know you better. And we'll put your information in the show notes so they can find you easily.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. And as I told you earlier, I came from a strategy background and all that business stuff. And it took my later years to realize, the people, you ain't got the people side, you ain't got nothing. So that's probably a double negative. What you're doing is, and you're coming from a professed left brainer, the most important thing companies can be doing. I really believe that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.